Objective morality. Why Christians don't have it. Why is it so important that morality be objective? If we are trying to be better humans, trying to treat people, animals, the planet, and so on with more respect, does it really matter that much if it comes down to objective or subjective? The only thing that I can see that the argument of objectivity seeks to establish is black and white rules. It's always wrong too. But the world just doesn't seem to work that way. Ultimately, there's an exception to every rule always seems to win out. Or does it? And is that the argument we should be having when really it should be about which morality better supports respect, autonomy, safety, responsibility, compassion? Who can say whose morality is objective? But you know what is objectively moral? Hitting that subscribe button and liking this video. Man, this episode is gonna get all tied up in knots. Not even the good kind.
What? What are you talking about?
Hello all! It would appear that despite the "un" before apologetic in my name, I've already got some apologizing to do. I took off the end of last week to have a romantic getaway with my partner in crime for his 40th. But here I am, back with you today and ready to be unapologetic. I am Laura and welcome to another installment of Unapologetically Me. It is time to get down and dirty into some apologetics. Today, I'm going to break down an argument that pops up over and over and over and over again. So I may as well just take my stab at it right off the bat. Now, I'm no Sam Harris, and I'm not Danielle Dennett when it comes to philosophy, and I am no Matt Dillahunty when it comes to discourse. So guys, this is going to be a layman's guide to the philosophical discussion of objective morality. Why there isn't, but is, such a thing, and why Christians just don't have it. It is a complicated as fuck concept, so I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible as I can, while still giving it the consideration that it is due. First, though, we need to kind of understand a few things. So I am going to steal a technique from my good friend Richard over on his channel, Skeptic Takeout. So let's see. Objective. How should we do this? Hey, there we go. According to the great and powerful giver of information, that's Google, objective means not dependent on the mind for existence, or actual. In other words, if there were no thinking beings in this universe, it would still be true. For example, this rock. Even if there were no minds to observe said rock, it would still be objectively true that this rock exists. That's objective. Oh, so that was fun. Okay, let's try another one. Subjective. So awesome. Just as one might expect, dependent upon the mind or of an individual's perception for its existence. If I were to say it's cold outside, it's my subjective experience. I mean, what is cold anyway, right? Have you ever seen the waters that narwhals swim in? Yeah, or what about Greenland sharks? Yeah, I'd call that cold, in my subjective opinion. Although they might have something else to say about it. Okay. So just one more, that way we're all on the same page, and then we can get to the meat of the conversation. Let's do morality. Yes! Oh man, look at that. Okay, let's just digest it, shall we? First, principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. Okay, I'm with you so far. A particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specific person or society. All right, we can work with that. The extent to which an action is right or wrong. Okay, well, this last one is vague, but I got it. If we agree on the definitions of morals as being those actions that are good or right, and objective as being whatever is not dependent upon the existence of a mind, we can at least move forward in this video. When I embraced religion, I concentrated a lot on trying to determine how I should live my life and what it means to be a good person. In other words, morality was, always has been, and still is very important to me. The claim I want to test today is that morality is dependent upon a God, such that if there wasn't a God, well then, all morality is subjective, and therefore the world would be a huge fucking mess. I mean, without a God, we'd all be raping and murdering and running amok. First, people, seriously. Let's stick with reality instead of inventing all these hypotheticals. If there is actually a God, the world is still exactly as it is now. And if there actually isn't a God, the world is still exactly as it is now. We don't all start magically raping and murdering people just because we've come to the conclusion that there's no God. There either is a God or there isn't. But what we have to work with is the same reality. Period. We don't get to make up if there really was a God, it would be like this, or if there isn't a God, it would be like that. So, I am going to work with the reality that we have now and not some hyperbolic, hypothetical world, okay? I am going to argue objective and subjective from my perspective and explain why I don't think Christians can actually make the claim that their morals are objective. Holy cow, people, here it goes. Okay, starting with the first claim. If there is a God and that God is the author of morality, then morality is objective. Going back to our definition, we see that objective describes that which is true even in the absence of a mind. So if morality relies on God's mind, it can never be objective. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it was just that simple? But look what happens here. Yeah, see, once we combine the terms objective and morality together, you can see a shift in people's use of the term objective. Suddenly, in the eyes of the believer, it does involve a mind, God's mind. This is where the disconnect happens between a Christian or Muslim theist and an atheist. Once you get to smuggle in that word mind into a definition of objective, we're now talking about two completely different definitions of objective. So before we get to move on, Mr. Religious Pants, can you at least acknowledge that this is a problem? To have something be objective, it has to be true, even if a mind, for example, God's mind, doesn't exist. So by smuggling in that morality is objective despite being from a mind, you've created yourself a nice little conundrum. Is it good because God says it's good? Or does God say it's good because it's good? You know what? That's your problem to solve, not mine. So I am going to go do something very unatheisty of me. I'm going to accept, for now, that you get to change the meaning of the term objective morality to include the mind of God. Guys, your morality is still subjective. You rely entirely on the interpretation of human minds to determine what God's morality is. So guys, either way, I'm confused. How can you make the claim that your personal set of morals is objective? I mean, how do you determine that the Christian sitting next to you in the pew is the one that's wrong? You're both hearing the same message from the pulpit. You're both reading the same Bible, maybe different versions. Let's say you're reading the same version. You're both praying for guidance, yet you come to different conclusions, which are both relying on the understanding of your minds. Do you see where I'm going with this? Your version of morality is no more than subjective morality with a good dose of arrogance. I really always struggled with this. Did God really write morals on our hearts? Even among Christians, there's no agreement on exactly what is moral and what isn't. It seems that our hearts all have something different to say on the matter. On mine, he wrote, love passionately. What did he write on yours? Oh, women should submit to men? Oh, man, that is some bullshit. Why did he go and make his words so susceptible to constant reinterpretation? Why did he do horrendous things that we would all agree are morally wrong and can only be explained away by saying that, well, he's just God and God is good and he can't do evil, therefore the evil he committed must actually be good? How can we call his morality consistent when it just so happens to be ever-changing alongside our cultures? I mean, let's be honest, it's almost as if at the same rate that we're realizing that something is morally wrong, well, God does too. Weird. There is simply no way to concretely determine where God's morality ends and where our morality begins. It's almost as though, as Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, we're all just doing the best that we can with the information that we have, and we're just hoping for the best. Even those of us that are religious. What about morality if there isn't a God? Is there still such a thing as objective morality with no God? No. But yes. But no. But actually, yes. No matter how we look at morality, it boils down to the subjective experiences of we meager humans and any other intelligent races that are out there. But that doesn't mean that we can't draw objective truths from our experiences. In simple language, I am saying that a person's experience of either pain or pleasure is subjective, but the fact that they are feeling that pain or pleasure is objective. It is objectively true, for example, that cilantro tastes like freaking soap. This means that while it might not be morally wrong to put cilantro in your guacamole because you like the taste of it, you'd be kind of a dick to purposefully put it in mine. It is objectively true that adding cilantro to my food will cause me discomfort and displeasure. When the experience becomes traumatic or harmful to an individual, or when it intrudes upon their rights to choose what happens to their body, it is objectively true that the subjective experience they're having is bad. It then becomes objectively bad to submit another person to that kind of experience. Again, this is true regardless of what God may or may not exist. It is completely dependent upon the experience of the individual. So when a theist says that atheists can't have morals without God, I disagree. Remember, I already presumed that there was a God, and now I'm presuming that there isn't a God. And in either case, how do we determine what is morally right and morally wrong? First, we can determine things like personal autonomy, that we don't have the right to infringe on someone else's right to make a decision about their own body. We can predict and measure the outcomes of certain actions, whether it causes pain and suffering, or whether it brings about a positive outcome, or whether or not it's completely morally neutral. Not all of our actions and words are a matter of morality. Once we determine that an action violates someone's personal will and causes pain and suffering, we can seek to avoid those actions. We even have the good judgment to determine whether something actually isn't morally wrong, although it does cause certain types of pain, such as getting a shot or cleaning out a cut. Yeah, we are that freaking smart. We are capable of telling the difference. We can seek to actively make this world a better place for as many of its inhabitants as we can, even if we're imperfect at it, or even if we're up against others who will not do the same. We can also acknowledge our mistakes, like, say, slavery. And we can call it out for what it is and actively seek to end it. We can do that not because it is written on our hearts that it is morally wrong, but because we can recognize the mistreatment, the pain, and the suffering of others. And we can choose to avoid that behavior, not just for the good of myself as an individual, but for the good of you as an individual. So, we've examined both kinds of morality, both of which have subjective aspects to them. The kinds of morals that are subjectively derived, but objectively describe the outcome, are exactly the kind of morals that we see in our world. They're the kind of morals that change over time, and that change as we evolve culturally and intellectually. It's the kind that's imperfect. It reflects the understanding of the groups that determine it. And yet, it is the kind of morality that we can determine is objectively wrong or right based on the subjective experience of the people, such that even if a group makes the determination that something is morally right, we can still override that and say, no, despite cultural preferences, that's morally wrong, and here's why. With or without a God, it's still up to us to determine right from wrong and to justify it. So where I think religion gets it wrong is by basing its morality not on the impact that an action has in the real world, but on whether or not it's allowed according to a holy scripture. A scripture that some say is unchanging, while others retranslate it to fit their own sense of morality. Scriptures that leave plenty of room for confusion and misinterpretation, while simultaneously discouraging reflective thought on whether that action is actually good or bad. Scriptures that discourage the challenging of the moral claim, requiring instead blind adherence. Those who dismiss a moral standing, such as those who abolished slavery but were religious, or those today who are religious but support LGBTQ rights, must do so in spite of their religious teachings, not because of them. And it often results in them having to retranslate the texts to fit their own interpretation of morality, thus making morality, what? Subjective. Religious morality must shift and change with the times and cultures as followers come to moral conclusions that conflict with the teachings. So when I think about my own morality, humanism allows me to do something that Christianity and Islam both denied me. And that's the ability to challenge a moral teaching and weigh it against its outcome in reality. Morality should not be reduced to just a claim in a book. It should be something that is discussed, dissected, debated, something that should be justified with reasons and evidence, not just dismissed because it isn't in the book, or accepted without cause because it is. As an atheist, I have the ability to flex my opinions based on whatever evidence is present for me, and to adjust my behavior in accordance with my best understanding of what it means to be a good person. Most importantly, I can now measure my actions based on the impact that they have, rather than an unrealistic set of expectations that require me to try and accept moral conclusions that I found confusing at best and repulsive at worst. As an atheist, I can tell you why I think it's morally right to support gay marriage and better sex education. As a Christian, I couldn't tell you why I had to find ways to justify how a God could make a moral judgment about homosexuality in the first place and still be a loving God. I couldn't explain why sex between consenting adults is morally wrong. I relied incredibly heavily on, yeah, I acknowledge it's a sin according to God, but He forgives all sins, so I'm not gonna judge. That way, I didn't have to reconcile differences I had with my moral code that was internal to me based on my observations and my experience in this world, and the moral code that I was being taught in the church. Now, I have to think a lot harder about my moral position on things. Most of my moral views haven't changed, they've just been kind of set free. But I have changed my position on things like my own modesty or how I can and should express myself. I no longer think that whether one has sex before marriage has any fucking thing to do with morality, as long as it's between consenting adults. Things that I thought were moral issues, over which I had struggled and struggled and struggled, I've come to realize aren't necessarily matters of morality at all. Things like whether you should honor your parents, or what kind of a relationship you're in. That'll be an awesome episode. Or what your sexuality is, an even more awesome episode. Or the language that you use. Can't wait to talk about that one. The point that I'm making is not that all atheists follow a better moral code than theists, which is why I call myself a humanist. I don't do good because I'm an atheist, just like I didn't do good because I was a Christian or a Muslim. I do good because I see the benefit of it, not just for myself, but for others as well. As an atheist, sometimes it's hard to determine the right thing to do. But I would rather have to seek and search and research and question and explore and have to put in the hard work prior to holding a view or making a decision or committing an action than just jumping straight in, resting assured that the words in the book are true, even if they are causing my actions to harm myself or others. So there you have it, morality from the perspective of an atheist humanist. My main goal was to approach the claim that I cannot have objective morality as a non-theist, and I wanted to turn that argument on its head. But I also hope that I explain things a little deeper about how I approach morality now that I don't have scriptures to rely on. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. But also, I have 2 pages worth of topics to discuss. But if you have anything that you want to see on a video, leave your recommendations below. 2 have already resulted in videos, and more have been added to my list for later. In other words, your feedback is so appreciated. Well, all right, so that's it for now. But remember, it is always okay to ask questions. Catch you next time. Bye!